Welcome to the second section of the Building Databases with Redis video course. We will devote this section to the administration and security of Redis servers. In this section, we will discuss the basics of the Redis server administration and some main ways to provide security for the Redis server. There are basically three ways to change the Redis server configuration parameters. The redis.conf file, which is loaded when the server starts and has some default options if you don't touch it. Passing options via command line arguments. In this case, the options are the same as in the configuration file, prefixed by two hyphens. And using Redis configuration commands. It is worth mentioning that these three ways have incremental priority. So the command line arguments have higher priority than configuration files. The Redis commands on the live server rewrite the previous configuration values. Let's start by exploring the first way of Redis server configuration, the redis.conf configuration file. If you have built the Redis project from source, as we did in the previous section, you can find the redis.conf file in the root folder of the project. If not, look through the documentation provided by the binary package maintainer. Now, let's open the file and look through its content. We won't discuss all the options in this video, but the file is pretty self-documenting, using commentary lines that are prefixed with the hash character. We'll also discuss some of the options in the future videos. The configuration file format is pretty simple. Non-commentary and not blank lines consist of the option name and option value separated by a space. So, when you change some settings, you have to restart the Redis server for the updated configuration to be applied. Let's change the port to 6378, which the server listens to, and restart our server. As you can see in the terminal, the server still listens the old port. It happens because the configuration file was not specified directly in the command line arguments, so all options are set to default ones. So let's run the Redis server binary by passing an additional command line argument /redis.conf. Look at the last line of the output. The port is now set to the new value. Now we have to restart the Redis CLI command line client in order to specify the newly set port number using the -p option. It leads us to success. You can also use the --help option either by running Redis server or Redis CLI to see all the options that are accepted by those binaries, with sufficient documentation on them. That's all on configuring Redis from a file. Let's continue with our newly configured Redis instance that is running. The next way to configure the Redis server instance is to set options using command line arguments. In order to override some option, you have to use this option with a name specified in redis.conf, prefixed with two hyphens as a command line argument to the Redis server binary. Let's try to run the Redis server instance with the port other than the default one while at the same time not specifying the configuration file. As you can see from the last line of the output, the port was set correctly. The same is true for any option you find inside the sample redis.conf file we were looking through earlier. The last way to configure the Redis server is to use the Redis configuration commands. There are two symmetric commands, config set and config get. They are used to set and get configuration options respectively. The most fascinating commands are those that modify Redis parameters on the fly. Let's try the same experiment with a change in port. First of all, let's get the port's value with config get port. Well, it's 6378, as we specified via the command line. Now, let's try to change it with config set port 6379. So what do we have? An error. This is very logical because the change in port will make all clients disconnect, and it generally does not make sense to change this option on the fly. So let's try to change the length of the slow commands log with config set slowlog-max-len 10. It says OK. You can use your knowledge now to get the option in order to ensure that the value was really set. It is cool to change the settings on the server on the fly, but if you use your custom redis.conf file when starting the Redis server, the options set by the config set command will be lost after server stops or restart. So you must directly tell the server to persist these changes to the configuration file. Fortunately, Redis has such a possibility covered by providing the config rewrite command. Let's execute the command in the client. An error again! Remember that we have started our server instance for the last time not specifying the configuration file, and the server tells us about this. You are free to experiment a bit. Try to run the Redis server configured from a file and persist an option the way we have discussed. That's all on configuration. We will return to some configuration options in the future sections and videos, as it is required to change configuration in order to turn on some of Redis features. Now we are ready to move to security topics, so in the next video we will discuss authentication.